Alright, so yeah, I'm gonna have to break this down in the two parts, part 1 and part 2, because my device here wouldn't let me record but for so long. So this is part 2, beginning part 2. The Dogon tribe of southwestern Africa maintain, however, their creator god splashed down, revealing themselves as Cetacean-like humanoidians who could survive in the reservoir of water they manufactured via their ship, or walk around like a human on land with the tribesmen. The modern day use of the fish as a representation of Jesus and Christianity, and the fact that the popes and priests of Catholicism wear huge fish head shaped hats as a part of their rendition of ancient Sumerian god king uniforms may not be a coincidence. A few hundred years ago, up until this day, so-called conquistadors and prisoner of war traders used the word nigger to degrade mighty men. In a time before the short, no more than 7,000 year history, his story of the Caucasian, also known as BC, before Caucasian, before Christ, before Christianity, before Caucasian, we were called the Neeters, or Natiru, which translates to mean God in Africa. In all of ancient Atlantean, African, Akkadian, Middle Earth, moreover. Everybody knew it. Statues all over the place of black men. Sambo, King Tut, they everywhere. On the moon, on Mars, everywhere. These gods were said to have very dark black skin. Whomever had the darkest skin was revered as the mightiest man. In Hindu Vedic Sanskrit, the word Naga, N-A-G-A, Naga, translates to mean serpent. Never to be confused with draconian reptilians, however. Don't get it fucked up. The Sambo god tribe, and it's so easy to. That's why they give us all these lies, but I'm going to explain it though. The Sambo god tribe of Nagas ruled India and Asia and were depicted as black-skinned and serpent-like. A lot of so-called authors and TV show hosts, whom are all agents of disinformation, insist that reptilian forces from Dracos, who have manifested themselves here in the form of 900-year-old saddlebag queen bitches, are indeed the hairy-faced, knotty-headed, dark black snake men or serpent men, whom were often depicted with animal heads at times. The ancient Anunnaki of Eridu, now known as Iraq, but formerly the Atlantean, Lemurian, Pangean, Sidonian, Akkadian, African supercontinent. The serpent or snake represents not only wisdom, but life, death, resurrection, and immortality, as shown by the snake's ability to regenerate every few days by shedding its exterior skin layer, a process similar to what happens with us humans, being displayed by our ability to duplicate trillions of cells by the minute, and the microscopic skin cells we shed every second. The Hu in human not only means hue, spelled H-U-E as in colored or black, but in Africa, Hu translates to mean snake or serpent. Egyptians called their pharaohs and god kings Ngr or Netgers, whom were seen as a representation of the sun and the sun god. Those of whom were of very dark skin, unlike Hollywood's portrayal of us, were very powerful, physically and culturally advanced in war and militarization. In ancient times, one couldn't be a ninja if he didn't have melanin. Then again, in ancient times, there were no non-melaninated people. The black skin was seen as a direct blessing from the sun god, Amun-Ra. So all you niggas out here talking light skin, dark skin, it don't matter, blah, 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 blah. It does matter. Because lighter skinned black people somewhere down the line have been watered down with non-Hu mankind Caucasus blood. I'm a light-skinned nigga. I'm one of them. And lo and behold, my mother's father's mother is very, very light-skinned. Maybe a hint of native land Indian, but besides that, great-great-grand is a white lady. Some members on my mother's side of family are very dark though, especially those of us born in the last 100 years, which indicates melanin strong evidence. My grandfather, who's my mother's father, was black as night if he sit out in the sun for 5 seconds. He was naturally a darker black man. That's why I try to sit outside for hours in the sun as long as possible. This is also why rich elite white men coordinate stratospheric aerosolized geoengineering, also known as SAG or chemtrailing. Not only cannot they handle UV ray sunlight, but they are attempting to permanently obstruct our atmosphere, turning even human to a lighter and paler complexion while inducing a realm where draconian demon-possessed Caucasoids can reign. So think happy, warm procession thoughts with me, folks. Can you do that with me? Think happy, warm procession thoughts. Usher in these suns with me. Can you do that? Appreciate it. The recognition of the black man being God was understood throughout all of Pangaea. This is the only way we can describe or explain what we call pyramids of the same identity with the same glyphs and etchings all over this post-Lemurian Atlantean world. Unless, of course, we consider collective consciousness and or the use of flying craft or teleportation, which still gives human beings way more credit than Europeans' theory of evolution, which claims we all come from a cave monkey dog man, which is technically their true and living foundation of existence. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds, said Robert Nesta Bob Marley. Speaking of Marley, and the only reason I'm mentioning this is because I know that you cannot believe everything on the internet. I know that. My suggestion is not to believing anything on the mainstream TV though. It's reports that they found a body of a dead man in Jamaica behind a convenience store. They tried to say that it looked just like Marley. Of course, they did an autopsy and all that, and they try to say that it's the DNA of Marley. It is Marley. Of course, we were told that Marley died though. We were not told that with a dude from the Beatles, Paul. The other people in the Beatles call him fake Paul. We were not told that this dude who we think is Paul McCartney is an imposter, because Paul McCartney did in fact die back in the 60s in a car crash. The woman who was with him, who don't got no legs right now, told the story about it. She probably dead now. My point is, I'm saying is that we can't believe anything. We can't believe anything we told. Michael Jackson, Prince, all them niggas might still be alive. That sound crazy. You know what I mean? Because everybody's for sure that they're dead. That's like white people saying Elvis still alive, or niggas saying Tupac still alive. That's crazy. My point that I'm making is that you can't believe none of this shit. You gotta do the research for yourself. Nobody knows that was really Marley at that found in the back of that convenience store. You know what I mean? Nobody knows that fake Paul McCartney is not the real Paul McCartney though either. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds, said Bob Marley. To begin to break free from the shackles of our enslaved governmental, we must be selective about the information we digest via mainstream television. Media has always had us invest in fabricated fantasy in the form of movies, television shows, and especially false flag, fear-filled acts of terrorism, hate. Media has always had us invest in fabricated fantasy in the form of movies, television shows, and especially false flag, fear-filled acts of terrorism and hate. carried out by our very own governments and promoted by local and national disinformation stations. For example, the United States government was found guilty of murdering Martin Luther King Jr. in a 1999 civil trial, but in 1999, they found the United States government guilty of murdering MLK Jr. However, we were led to believe James Earl Ray and racism was the culprit for years now. In the 1950s, the U.S. faked a moon landing, which they still propagate to this day. And in the 1940s, the United States faked an alien invasion via radio broadcasts. Look all that shit up. 1950s, we faked the moon landing. Matter of fact, that movie The Shining with Jack Nicholson, they got a movie out that break that movie down. It breaks The Shining down, and it talks about how they are subconsciously telling the masses that they didn't really go to the moon. Look that shit up. Look it up. In the 1950s, we faked the moon landing. In the 40s, we faked the alien invasion. Operation Mockingbird is a fully implemented CIA program to spread disinformation and lies throughout American media. According to CIA Director William Colby, agents are active in the U.S. media to control what is and is not reported through mainstream TV, newspapers, and magazines. Operation Mockingbird. Why the television was implemented. So the CIA and everybody else could tell you lies. Operation Mockingbird. Look it up. United States government patent number 6506148B2 involves nervous system manipulation via electromagnetic fields from monitors. Computer monitors and TVs emit pulse electromagnetic fields to excite a sensory resonance. It has been found that the resonance can be excited not only by externally applied electric fields, but also by pulsed magnetic fields and by weak heat pulses applied to the skin and by subliminal acoustic pulses. Since the resonance is excited through sensory pathways, it is called a sensory resonance. We are being skillfully manipulated via everything from our electronic devices and weather modification to the fluoridated water and food-like poison product we ingest. Not to mention the soaps, deodorants, and various hygienic products we use, like the lotions and the oils and all that. And also the stuff we listen to called music. A direct assault on us. Why? Why the clandestine infiltration and attack? Why? Because we are everything, and everything is within us. Supreme being, created in the image of God, supreme intelligence. Hence the riddle behind what is called the Sphinx. Master your domain, animal instinct, and perception of reality with your mind and brain. For the record and comparative analysis reasons, they are what the European has dubbed the Sphinx and pyramids on Mars, the Moon, and the celestial body named Ceres, Ceres, which is being kept hidden from us in the asteroid belt. Reports of statues of black men on Mars and the Moon as well. There's been discovery of the remains of a brown dreadlock woman on the lunar surface. And according to Norman Berggruen, ex-government official, look that guy up, Norman Berggruen, Bergrun. He like a 100-year-old white man. Talking about, he used to work for the CIA, the NSA, NASA. He used to work for all of the alphabet boys. And he on YouTube talking about what they saw, what they keeping hidden from us on the dark side of the moon. According to Norman Berggruen, ex-government official, Jet black as night. Black as night. Jet black. Black is your t-shirt, nigga. Jet black as night. Heavy melaninated humans inhabit the moon and Saturn. The moon is not what we think it is, folks. The moon, and as well as these other planets, including Earth, plain T Earth. Listen to the word planet. Plain T. Plain T Earth. Plain T moon, Mars. These aren't planets, folks. They're like spaceships or something. Do some research. Look that shit up. Look up irregularities of the moon, and you'll find your own truths. The more information that is revealed will yield the understanding of we inhabit the entire universe. According to prominent scholars, the melaninated being is consistent throughout immeasurable heaven, our newly titled Milky Way galaxy, which is actually a part of a supercluster of galaxies. Immeasurable heaven. You YouTube that shit. Immeasurable heaven. That's what they calling our Milky Way galaxy, which is a part of a supercluster of dozens of galaxies. According to prominent scholars, the melaninated being is consistent throughout immeasurable heaven, our newly titled Milky Way galaxy, which is actually a part of a supercluster of galaxies. It is only here, allegedly, casted far out away from the suns, stars, and UV light radiancy of immeasurable heaven. It is only here on plain T Earth do we have the non-melaninated, no more than 7,000-year-old genetically manipulated abomination. Welcome to hell, ladies and gentlemen. Ice water, anyone? When the original colonies of America were being established, our so-called filthy founding fathers claiming independence and escaping shit-laden England, where disease and pestilence manufactured the worst plague known to man, the Black Death. The filthy founding fathers were mandated upon so-called establishing America over here after having to escape Europe and England because they were so disgusting. They just shat in the street. They didn't have no sewer systems. That's why after they killed off all the Native American Indians, they had to go to Africa and get us to come over here and build this shit back up for them, so they wouldn't turn this into a Europe where it was so nasty that the mud in Europe was dung. It was shit and mud together. They didn't have no sewer. It was so nasty over there. The worst plague known to man derived from it. They had to leave from there, and they came to the native land, and now here we are. The filthy founding fathers were mandated to grow hemp, also known as marijuana, for everything from textiles to food. The same marijuana that has been now classified with heroin and LSD as a Schedule I drug having no medicinal qualities, despite the fact that the United States government owns patent number 6630507 on cannabis having medicinal qualities for treating a wide range of diseases via antioxidants and neuroprotectants. Cocaine, however, has been placed in a lower class, Schedule II, than marijuana. Meaning, hey kids, it's okay to sniff blow, but stay away from marijuana muffins. Bullshit. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were ordered by King George III, the tyrant Europeans were allegedly declaring independence from, while establishing the Great Britain United Kingdom number 2, here, the United States, because of how shitty and infected England had become. The filthy founding fathers who wouldn't have even known how to wash their ass and brush their teeth if it had not been for our great Moorish African ancestors were mandated by European monarchy to produce and manufacture marijuana via the original colonies established here in the native land, or clean, disease-free New World, according to white Anglo-Saxon, Spaniard, Portuguese conquerors. More than half of the native land, black, brown, and red indigenous Indians died from diseases like smallpox shortly after English invasion. Never mind the intentional murdering, genocide, and mass eradication of an entire faction of our ancestors. Millions, if not billions, wiped off the face of the planet. Meanwhile, hundreds and thousands of helpless 10-year-old Pocahontases were raped by 50-year-old John Smiths, eventually producing an entire new race, the Hispanic and Latino we know today, who seem like, if I didn't know any better, they believe they white people. It's a lot of niggas out here that's whiter than the whitest white man. No, real talk. We wear their clothes, we eat their food, we pray to their Jesus. So, moving right along. In 1619, the first United States marijuana laws forces farmers to grow hemp. In fact, the original drafts of the United States Constitution were written on hemp paper. Heavy growage of tobacco came afterwards because of European addiction to nicotine. In the 1800s, here in the United States, marijuana was declared a useful medicine for nausea, rheumatism, or rheumatoid arthritis, and labor pains. Marijuana declared a useful medicine for arthritis, nausea, and labor pains from working all day long. Marijuana was easily obtained at the local pharmacy. This was in the 1800s, right here in the United States. By 1937, however, Harry J. Anslinger's Marijuana Tax Act mandated a special tax stamp requirement to transport marijuana in and around the United States because of Olmecan Mexicans migrating northwards looking for work and bringing their marijuana crops with them. This enforced effective taxation on anyone in possession of marijuana. Meanwhile, the television, doing what it was invented to do, infused and excited the masses with fear in the form of movies like Reefer Madness, effectively placing a bullseye target on America's new drug smuggling terrorists, Mexicans. Before the 1937 Taxation Act, Americans could order marijuana from the Sears and Roebuck's catalog, along with cocaine and heroin. Then in the 1940s implemented was the Harrison Act, laws mandated by a rich Republican Democrat because his wives and daughters kept giving birth to mulatto and mestizo children, effectively criminalizing marijuana. The reefer made the women horny, they claimed. In the 1960s, the CIA, FBI, and South American drug cartels collectively put a halt to one of the most influential community movements used to empower people. By flooding the streets of California with cocaine and heroin, strong leaders of men, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, were targeted and eliminated. The 1961 Convention on Narcotics Treaty, orchestrated by before-mentioned Harry J. Anslinger, would force the entire nation into more mandated marijuana laws. Soldiers returning back to the U.S. from the Vietnam War asserted that marijuana was harmless and moreover was a medicine that helped ease traumatic post-war diseases. These soldiers were labeled extremists, communists, and left-wingers. And the war on drugs mantra began. War, war, war. There has to be war. No money is made without war. The military-industrial complex, a subcontractor of the United States Corporation, which has stock on Wall Street, loses money without war. The 1970s and 1980s Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan joint war on drugs campaign has increased America's incarceration rate by 1,000%. And the Nixon campaign admitted it. The Nixon campaign admitted to targeting blacks, dark-skinned people, and so-called African Americans. And this one of many of false flag fiascos. It has been so much of an increase in incarceration in America. Private corrections corporations and subcontractors have had to be implemented into the corporation of the United States. Thus, the manufacturing and implementation of more legal tender by the Federal Reserve. According to everyone's favorite American woman, Hillary Rodham Clinton, it is a fact that the United States has less than 5% of the world's total population, yet we have almost 25% of the world's total prison population. Meanwhile, the CIA, FBI, and black budget shadow black operatives that everyday civilians will never even know exist control the trafficking of drugs as Wall Street launders the dirty money via big banking businesses and private military contractors. There is no war on drugs. There is no war on drugs. Opium-based pills. There is no war on drugs. Once again, opium-based pills. That's some false flag bullshit they needed to lock more black people up, nigga. Opium-based pills like Percocet and oxycodone have us all doped up by way of doctor's orders. The United States has been smuggling plants not indigenous to America into this union for approximately 80 years, while people like Frank Lucas, who was briefly allowed to transport heroin with the help of the CIA and the military during the early 1900s, are jailed for the majority of their lives, successfully indicted and charged with fall guy. Without something for America's dope dealing gangster thug criminal terrorists to fight and kill each other over, while being induced with an overabundance of frequency from power lines, cell phone towers, and electronics like the television, there may be no dope dealing gangster thug criminal terrorists, effectively eliminating the judicial system. Hence the successful transition from the war on drugs mantra to the more recent war on terror rant. Even easier now to convince Americans to give up our freedoms and liberties via legislation like the Patriot Act, which has successfully made any and everybody who doesn't agree with totalitarian dictatorship a terrorist. And now collecting rainwater and possessing real milk from an actual animal is illegal. Soon the very polluted, chemically laced substance we call air will be taxed and therefore criminalized somehow. In most, if not all, rural cities, there are way more power lines directly overhead than the number of power lines and cell phone towers in suburban, county, and country farmland regions. Of course, there has to be more power lines to supply the many hundreds of thousands and millions of residents in the cities, right? Wrong. Nikolai, I told you 100 years ago, Tesla invented wireless communications and electric transfer from one point to another in the early 1900s, which would have rendered the intentionally planned false flag, the Great Depression, non-existent. Now we got all these motherfuckers out here talking about they want to go green. Oh, we going green. Oh, we need to get some solar panels and all. Man, this shit ain't even never was supposed to be like. It was set up like this so America could get paid. And now everybody want to go green. Tesla invented wireless communications and electric transfer from one point to another in the early 1900s, which would have rendered the intentionally planned false flag Great Deception non-existing. Tesla's inventions would have avoided the ridiculous large amounts of power lines and Gwen towers used in crowded inner cities across this nation. The same power lines and Gwyn towers that have been associated with brain malfunction, as well as violent behavior in these heavily power line and Gwyn towered areas. However, Tesla's inventions, whom he admitted receiving from a higher source via the planet Mars, that's us, would have resulted in no need for any of the many energy subcontracting services employed by the Corporation of the United States. Yeah, I just want to mention that Albert Einstein, Tesla, there's a couple other German scientists or whatever, white people if you will, in their offices, on their desk, in their science labs and all that. I just want to mention that they had the statues and small figurines of Asar and Aset and other ancient Egyptian gods and kings. Einstein and Tesla, they were up on it. They knew. All the white people know who we are. They have symposiums and conferences discussing how can we effectively extract their melanin and put it in the form of a pill to help us. Maybe that's why babies had their blood taken from them with or without your consent. When a baby is born in that hospital, they having their blood taken. The first thing that happens when you put in a emergency vehicle, they hook you up to the IV and start draining your God juice from you. Listen to what I'm telling you, people. Tesla's inventions, whom he admitted receiving from a higher source via the planet Mars, would have resulted in no need for any of the many energy subcontracting services employed by the United States Corporation, resulting in major profit loss for America, which was instituted by way of the Act of 1871, also known as the Act of the 41st Congress, wherein which this great sovereign lands, so-called discoverers, forefathers, owners, and slave masters had to loan money from the tyrants and monarchies whom they just declared independence from a short 100 years ago or less. The international banking Rothschild cartel of London, England. The same people that came over here, killed off all the Indians, went to Africa, enslaved all the black people, brought them over here to build up their shit. After they tore the land all up from destroying and decimating the Indians, they had to loan money from the same people they declared independence from. Imagine if that was you, somebody asking about, oh yeah, you want to borrow my money? Yeah, sure. But you got to set up the same establishment that I got here. Just make sure you got a sewer system so we ain't got to wallow around in shit. There should have never been a rotary phone age, and subsequently no marketing, campaigning, and eventual transition to our brave new wireless world. Instead, however, Nikola Tesla was labeled a radical mad scientist, and he and his paperwork simply disappeared, while people like Albert Einstein and Thomas Edison are credited for Tesla's achievements. And now, to the unfortunate demise of our children, inner city youth, most of whom are of Indian and African descent, the same native land Indians whom were systematically terminated by the millions due to foreign European invasion, the same African prisoners of war whom were captured and removed from ancient Kush and Kemet, then brought here to replace all the murdered Indians for building and construction of this American civilization we know today via slave labor. The offspring, inner city youth, the melaninists, that's us. We must survive in the pits of hell, unknowingly battling electrical current frequency attacks via the constant bombardment of the overabundance of electromagnetic pulse and resonance, resulting in an increase of violent crimes and a decrease of rational thinking. The concept of jailing and institutionalizing us, however, is very fruitful for the United States Corporation. This entire America is nothing but a business. Every way they can, any which way they can, they gonna get money. Soon they gonna be taxing the air where you can't. They tax the water. All it, man. I'm trying to tell you something, man. The concept of jailing and institutionalizing us, however, is very fruitful for the United States Corporation. Each inmate or intake is worth a certain amount of money. 3 hots and a cot are necessary for so-called housing. The federal municipality of the United States Corporation must then allocate the local and state entities money for each detainee. We're talking about billions of dollars here. Remember, America has the highest rate of incarceration on the planet. The very word detention being implemented in our school systems, coupled with the fact that institutions and jails are being constructed to mirror the appearance of schools, is proof enough for me. Maybe the fact that the number of jails and institutions being built is based on the number of kindergartners whom are enrolled in schools across America each year is enough proof for you. Maybe the fact that there are more jails and institutions being built than there are schools and community centers is enough proof for us all. As we know, upon the ending of businesses' fiscal year, taxes must be reported, recorded, and reimbursed for the amount of funds used and or allocated. The more citizens that are quote-unquote housed, the more money has to be accounted for, which in turn leads to more reportings, recordings, and reimbursement to and from the United States Corporation and its employees. In other words, they want you in jail. They want to keep you locked up. That's why the schools look like jails. They're trying to get our children used to being in jail because it's worth money. The 13th Amendment, which has been titled The Abolishment of Slavery, reads as such: neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to the United States jurisdiction, which is pretty much everywhere in the world. Essentially, slavery was never truly outlawed or made illegal. It was only like politicized. It was made politically correct. Yet we are hypnotized to pledge allegiance to this shit every day. I pledge allegiance to the flags of the United States of America. Bullshit. In the last few moments of this audiobook, commentary, I will be explaining how invisible nothingness is everything within us and all around us. Invisible nothingness. Atoms and subatomic particles, also known as molecules, macromolecules, and gases, is what ourselves, our planet, and our entire universe is made up of. Invisible nothingness. With cool names like particles and gases and shit. Planet Earth's entire atmosphere, troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, ionosphere, the entire atmosphere is made up of gases, particles, and molecules. Then there's so-called quote-unquote space, which is allegedly molecule and or particle free, being supposedly unable to resonate sound or feeling. Even though there's been astronaut account of the moon, and I quote, ringing like a bell after being impacted with a nuclear warhead under orders of the government. According to abouteducation/weather.about.com, the last layer of the atmosphere, called the thermosphere, is measured at 50 to 90 miles above Earth and contains less than 0.01% of all air within the atmospheric envelope. Less than 0.01% of all air within the atmospheric envelope. Temperatures here in the thermosphere level of the atmosphere, temperatures here reach upward of 2,000 degrees, but the gas molecules making up the air are so far apart the temperature is not felt. What? All that shit, all eugenic European science, you can find a hole in it. I got a couple buddies that they real into. They feel like, well, the only way to beat the establishment, you got to join the establishment. I'm gonna go get me a degree, one small degree and portion of all the knowledge, and that's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get certified. The fuck up. You sound like a dummy. temperatures here at the thermosphere, the last layer of the atmosphere, where there's less than 0.01% of all air within the atmospheric envelope, temperatures reach upward of 2,000 degrees. But the gas molecules making up of the air are so far apart the temperature is not felt. That's according to abouteducation/weather.about.com. I believe the overabundance of detailed explanations and blatant lies or disinformation from plagiarized European scientists stolen from our ancient forefathers have before and will again prove to us that we are indeed nothingness, which is everything, spirit, source, alpha and omega, beginning and ending, God, as described by the so-called God particle. Macromolecules, gases, and particles smaller than subatomic. That's what atoms and particles and subatomic particles, is made up of what they call the God particle. Something even smaller than invisible nothingness. It's right here in our faces, man. And scientists have admitted that everything on a molecular level varies when not observing it under microscope. Temperatures of the outer atmosphere are intensely extreme, yet due to molecules and particles, which are nothing more than cool names describing invisible to the naked eye nothingness, not being close enough to each other, these particles and molecules not being close enough to each other, extremities to the tune of 2,000 degrees are not felt in the thermosphere. To me, this is proof of what has to be a successful transformation from this physical realm to that of the etherical realm at the 50 to 90 mile above the Earth vicinity. Hence the ridiculously large amount of power lines directly overhead and the plethora of Gwyn towers used. This, coupled with the diet of inner city residents, which consists mainly of grease-fried red meat, white refined high fructose corn syrup sugar-based snacks, and malt liquor, is why so many are ill and dying due to piss poor health and violent crimes. Power lines, Gwyn towers, and shitty fast food and malt nigger liquor stores on every corner in cities all across America. And it has been engineered as such in an effort to keep our physical embodiment successfully separated from our true divinity, spirit, via frequency. Or maybe just great placement for exceptional cable service and electricity. The vegetable oil, refined sugar, poisoned, completely oblivious, trying to survive without getting killed or going to jail, average person would infer. That's what they would say. No, that's everybody gotta have electricity. So now we got pretty much people vouching for this bullshit because they don't know the truth. So they take the white man's sciences, education, religion, and everything they do and try to prove why it's okay, why it's right. Bullshit. Imagine, however, being able to blast off rocket-esque from the ground at the velocity of speed reached at the 50 to 90 mile mark after being dropped out of a plane. I am purporting or concluding that before reaching the thermosphere level of the atmosphere, one would have had to make successful the transition to spiritual etherical man. I may be overthinking this a bit, however. Some people believe sitting cross-legged in a really quiet place, performing focused breathing techniques while self-inducing a trance-like state of consciousness accomplishes this a lot faster, possibly as fast as a lightning strike shineth during a storm descending from clouds that have formed water in the midst of a 2,000 degree atmosphere, which uses nothing, titled subatomic particles, macromolecules, and gases as its basis for existing. Clear evidence of miracles and magic, if you will, but it's conveniently explained away as science according to European education. Meanwhile, according to the Bobby Hemmett archives, Bobby Hemmett Archives #1. We control the weather. Black people, we control the weather. People control the weather. This reality and the entire universe with our thoughts. The very word thought stems from the name of one of our ancient ancestors, Thoth. Central processing units and weather control devices known as HARP was reverse engineered from the human's mind and brain. I am also concluding that the plethora and overabundance of overhead power lines in conjunction with heavy metal overdose via chemtrails, hygiene products, and food like poison is a concerted effort by the rich elite powers that be, which just so happens to be mankind, former cave-dwelling entities, in the current manifestation of Ashkenazi Jews, royal families of England, and U.S. presidents whom are blood related to the Ashkenazi and royal families, and whom are directly responsible for the increase of violence and poverty in areas with these overhead power lines, which should have never even existed. We are supposed to be using these cell phones, wireless telephones, all these smart computers with the pop-up images and all that. They been had this shit for 100 years. Tesla had this 100 years ago, and he said that he got it from somebody else from 100 years ago. More than that, longer than that. I am concluding that the plethora and overabundance of overhead power lines in conjunction with heavy metal overdose via chemtrails, hygiene products, and food like poison is a concerted effort by the rich elite powers that be, which just so happens to be non-humankind, former cave-dwelling entities, in the current manifestation of Ashkenazi Jews, royal families of England, and U.S. presidents whom are blood related to the Ashkenazi and royal families, and whom are directly responsible for the increase of violence and poverty in areas with these overhead power lines, which in turn keeps jails and institutions filled and corporate taxation circulating and accumulating, instead of we, the melanated people, ascending into communion and oneness with our true selves. God bless you.